Thank you. Let's start with the presentation.
That informal. All right. We're ready.
We did support them.
Well, my name is Brent Ventura. I'm with Horrocks Engineers, and I'm representing the Mount Nebo Water Agency today in their technical committee. We have a couple members with us. Tyler Kuhn and Chris Hansen are both on the technical committee. Tyler being from Goshen Valley local district, and Chris being from Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Each of the different agencies that we'll talk about here has a representative on that group. But got a hold of the mayor, and we've finished up a phase one, and we've been tasked with coming to present that to some of the non-member agencies to let you know what we're doing, fill you in, and maybe see if you wanted to support the group and participate. So alternatively, I think Chris was going to today give us a little bit of a rundown what the agency did. Yeah, he is a reminder if you don't know, if you've never heard, maybe
You will be new to two.
New to two and a refresher course.
Have an idea.
Okay. Well, and feel free to interrupt us and ask questions informally as you want, but we're happy to answer them.
Just sitting on a chair informal enough for you.
Okay.
Again, I'm Chris Hansen. I work with Central Utah Water in Orem. The Mount Nebo Water Agency is 2 years old now.
Close.
Roughly 2 years old now. It's an interlocal agency that was put together by Payson, Salem, and Spanish Fork cities in conjunction with Utah County, our district, and then the Goshen Valley Local District. Each of those entities has a seat on the board, and then Utah County actually has 2 seats, and through contract with Strawberry Highline Canal, Strawberry has a seat on the, or Highline Canal Company has a seat on the board also. Where it is an interlocal agency, they have to be public entities, and that's why Highline couldn't be there without the contract to Utah County.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yep.
Why is Spanish Fork part of the group, since they don't get any of the water out of the canal?
Okay, so let's back up. So this is a group. Let's start a little bit with what Mount Nebo's about. Mount Nebo was founded by those cities and those other entities to look at the needs of water and to protect the water in South Utah County. This isn't an agency about the Highline Canal. The Highline Canal is a member through contract of the agency, but the only thing this agency is dealing with is not the Highline Canal Company. That's just a sidebar of what's going on here. Highline Canal is a big player in how things go in the future because of the right-of-way and the possibility of using that canal for ways of conveying water. But this agency is not about the Highline Canal. Highline Canal Company, through contract, is a member, but this is not about the canal company. This is about all of South Utah County. Does that help?
But the Highline Canal has a voting
They
right.
do have a vote on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and part of the reason that we're doing this little bit of kind of public outreach is to both inform the other entities in the area and invite if they want to participate. Now there's a cost associated with being a part of the agency, and it's just operating cost. The agency does not have any taxing authority, it does not have any revenue stream except the funding that comes through the agency members. And so, that's where it's coming from. These entities took it upon themselves to put this agency together, and they're ponying up the money to make these things happen. Again, just looking at overall needs and demands and supplies down the road. That's all the agency's really doing right now. Some of this is looking or could be looking at what's going to happen with Highline, but right now we've undergone one project which we're going to report on tonight. Brent from Horrocks Engineers was awarded that contract to do a phase 1 study, which is just an analysis of what's going on in the area with the studies that have already been done, and to look at holes where more study needs to be done. Eventually we want a real comprehensive overview of the whole south end of the valley, that we can say this is where we're going to need water, this is where we're going to have water, this is how we're going to supply those needs, this is where we're going to come up short, what are we going to do about it? Those are the types of questions that we're trying to come up with an answer. And so our hope from this phase 1 study is that we can move into a phase 2 study where we go in and look at that this is the boundary of the agency, which is just South Utah County, kind of an arbitrary line there north of Spanish Fork, not including Springville and Mapleton, drawn out to the west. And then as we went into the study, we thought that we would divide that by the drainage area out there too. And so our line changed a little bit. We didn't make it all the way out to the west because of the drainage divide there. And we pushed up a little bit along Redwood Road there, along the west shore of Utah Lake. And so you can see that, no big deal. But you know, we're just looking at the phase 2. We want to be able to quantify sources, groundwater, everything, you know, water rights, all the things that are going to happen there. Mona reservoirs could come into it. You know, we have the groundwater basin there that we're looking at. Just a lot of things that are happening there. But I'll let Brent just get into a little more detail about the study, and we can talk a little bit more about where we're trying to go from there.
Interestingly, you'll notice on this, the green line is the agency boundary, the blue line is the study area boundary, and yet we've not even confined ourselves to that blue line. We've also included Salem, Pace, and Spanish Fork in this area, in that blue line in the study, collecting information. It hasn't been a massive effort, but it has included information from them. So just to give you an idea, just the breakdown of the idea of the study is to collect all the existing studies, and the technical committee originally knew about 12. What's that? Oh, okay.
Might be easier to read with the light on here.
Oh, yeah, it might be. This is the same thing that's in your packet too. If you want to flip through those, it's probably easier to see here. The idea of phase 1 was to collect all the studies that have been done here inside the study boundary, or including the study boundary. Some of them went way outside, but it was get a background review of what exists, what data is out there, and then phase 2 would take that existing data that was summarized and fill in the gaps, do a comprehensive study from the Mount Nebo Water Agency that would incorporate all of those things, plus add to it and make a comprehensive study that everybody felt comfortable about the water resources, where we're at, where we're going, how they'll be shared and utilized in the future. So this is phase 1. We've accomplished phase 1. We've collected the data that was down here, and what we actually ended up with, we identified, organized, analyzed that data, as I mentioned, and we put it into a spreadsheet. And this is where it gets kind of hard to see, and so I printed it out for you. It's a little easier to see in your handout. But there were 20, I think that lined up to be 24 different studies, and there were a few outside those, some that were older and we didn't feel were as useful to this portion of the study. And we grade in some of the columns that were the most useful information, the most important. The first 3 being our existing situation here with each of the agencies here in the south end of the valley. What do we know? From each of those studies, can we glean what the existing water rights are, what the water situation is, and what our needs are? And so we tried to fill in those 2-3 columns with everything we know from existing studies. And you can see there's some gaps in there. Probably a third of it's still empty and didn't have answers. Some of those studies aren't specifically geared towards water, and so they're not going to have those answers. But the major part that's empty, that was the glaring emptiness, was the end. These last 5 columns are, in the future, where are we all going together? Are there sufficient water rights to meet our needs? How are we going to do it? What projects do we need to do? And none of these studies addressed those issues. There were a few, 3 or 4 that had some little numbers in there about what they might need in the future, but none of them addressed all of those situations and how they're going to work together with neighboring communities. And so that ends up pretty empty. There's the boundary of what we studied. You can see, like I said, it reaches out towards Spanish Fork a little bit. Excuse me. The blue kind of indicates completeness of how much study's been done in the area. The dark blue over there in the Spanish Fork Payson area means they've gotten their master plans done, their capital facilities plan, their water forecasting, and a 40-year plan, that kind of thing. They've done a pretty comprehensive look at their area. The lighter blue you get, the less there's been done in that particular area. So as you can see over in the Goshen Valley, there's a little bit been done, and there's some of the areas that are yellow, unincorporated county, that have absolutely no planning whatsoever. So as a group, as a whole, this South Utah County area, there's a little portion of it that's got a pretty good water study, but we don't know how that really interconnects with the other groups and where others are planning on getting their water from and things. So that's kind of what fell out of the study. Phase 2 then, the idea was to take that information and identify what it would take to do a complete study, to build a phase 2 scope of work that would work for that. And this is just shows you the first page of that. It was probably 2.5 pages. We've got this. We have a report that includes all this data that we can send you if you'd like to see it. in a PDF format or hard copy, whatever.
That would be great if you could send that.
Okay, we can shoot that your way, and you can see what the recommendations were and all the concerns and the findings. This just identifies a scope of work that we then broke down by task 1, 2, 3, and I think we ended up with 8 or 10 tasks, and to help assist the Mount Nebo group in identifying, I guess I'll get to that. I should have put the cost estimate after this, but we've come up with a cost estimate, a scope of work for that study. The idea then of the final task that we had to do was identify each of these different agencies, Payson, Salem, Spanish Fork, Central Utah, who has contributed already towards studies that bring this data, and try and see who's contributed already towards the end result, and therefore who may need to contribute less towards a phase 2 because they've already put a lot of skin in the game. So we built another little chart, a spreadsheet, if you will, with identifying each of those agencies, and then the blues again indicate completeness of that study. And as you go down the list, you see fewer and fewer things, and then the value that's created and the dollar value that's associated with that. And we just kind of use this as a basis. It was just more of an information thing. And what fell out of that as an idea amongst the agencies of who might participate to what level in phase 2. Here is the scope of work on phase 2. The scope that I mentioned to you had those 8 tasks, and we assigned a dollar value and an hours of effort to each one of those tasks, and then broke them down, as you can see in the columns there. They get kind of blurry as to who's doing what, but it fell out to be about $280,000, and we feel like that's a conservative estimate. We don't want it to be anything more than that or a surprise. And to get a task, so between right now the member agencies, there are 7 member agencies, somehow want to accomplish that. And the idea of us coming out with this outreach program, like Chris said, is to encourage each of these, the non-member agencies, to participate. We'd love to see input from each of you and assistance in getting to the point that we want to have with a final study, with everybody's input, everybody's needs, everybody's master plan for their water in their area. So that kind of concludes all the slides that we have. Would love to hear any questions that you might have or concerns that it raises or things that you've already done.
So my question to you is, why do we need to be a member if we're not going to get any water from the canal? Our only water source is our wells. What happens out in Goshen Valley stays out in Goshen Valley, so to speak. I mean, that's why. Sell me on the idea or the reason why we would want to take money that we don't have to join an agency that really, other than becoming part of the good old boys club on the surface.
I think, again, and again, your comment is that you're not going to get any water out of the canal. Again, we're not talking about the canal.
Well, that's where most of the water is coming, though.
Well, we're talking about South Utah County, and we're talking about it as a whole, so that we can evaluate where the growth's going to happen. If the growth's going to happen in Elk Ridge, do you have the water supply that you need for it? And if you don't, where's it going to come from? Those are the questions that we're trying to answer. And we are going to answer them, whether you guys have answered them for yourselves or not. We're trying to. We don't know your city like you do.
Right.
And so, like we talked about with the existing studies, Spanish Fork's done a very good job and they've put a lot of money, over $200,000 in the studies about quantifying their water rights, quantifying their supply, and where that demand is going to be, and if there's going to be a demand. And they feel pretty good about the future. They don't feel like they're going to need any water. But, depending on where all that Southfield stuff goes, that could become Spanish Fork, then they could maybe need some water. Those are the questions we're trying to answer here. Is, if you guys look at 40 years out, how big is Elk Ridge going to grow in 40 years? What do you have for water now? How are you going to supply that demand in 40 years? Do you have enough supply now to handle 40 years from now? If you do, great. If you don't, then there's a problem.
Well, we do. We have a capital facilities plan. We've laid it out. We've done everything that these other cities have done.
It's been a very recent study that we've done. In fact, I offered it to someone at one of the meetings that we have this information if you wanted to collect it.
To take it,
Be
plug
great.
it in.
We would love to see it. We really would.
And I know.
And that was a pretty fast process as we were trying to, we're trying to get Nebo rolling and a fledgling organization. We're not, we're just trying to figure out what's going on too. But you know, we found every report that we knew about, and if there's stuff out there that we didn't know about, you know, we would love to have it, and we'd still love to take it and incorporate it, because we'd like to know, you know, we'd like to fill in any of those gray areas that we can. Is anything we fill in, the stuff we don't have to do down the road.
I had offered it, and I don't remember who specifically. I said it's available. If you would like, please contact us. And I talked with our engineers, and they said, yeah, we'll make that available.
Yeah, we'd love to have it.
So, but on top of this, of course, we really still need to understand where Sumwa is in this, and I know that that's a major part of what you're looking at. Has to be.
It is.
Is Sumwa a dead animal just taking its last breath?
We've had this discussion recently.
But you see, we don't know that yet, and even though we go to the
We don't know it either.
And as a mayor, I'm one of the voting members of Sumwa, and I
Yep.
understand that. So,
And that's kind of where we're going.
yeah.
You know, the three cities, Payson, Salem, and Spanish, I think I can't speak for them, but the feeling I get is that Sumwa wasn't accomplishing anything.
And we believe that too.
And they decided to try and put together something that not only kind of went the same direction as what their original intent was, but also pulled in some other entities that are important. Sumwa was the 10 cities, as you know,
Right.
which is just the cities. But as we start talking about the area that we're looking at, there's so many more possibilities there. The county being one, because so much of the land is county and incorporated
85% of
land
the
right
water
now.
is going to
Okay.
agriculture in the county.
And so that's one of the reasons Utah County was brought in. Central Utah was brought in because of the importance of the South Pipeline that's going to be coming through with ULS Water, which Sumwa still has the contract for. That contract is still in Sumwa's hands, and that water will go to wherever it goes. And you know the way that water was divvied up. When the ULS plan was formulated, the 30,000 acre feet coming south had to go to somebody, and the cities weren't ready individually to contract for the water, and so Sumwa was developed for that reason, and contracted with the district for that 30,000 acre feet of water. And there was a number put out there. Each city got X amount based on their current population, which is great originally, but as we go down the road, that's probably not where the water is going to be needed. And so that allocation, and Sumwa is going to have to handle that or divulge that contract to somebody else, but that allocation is going to have to change somehow to go to where it's needed. Spanish Fork doesn't need 30% of that water. They may not need anything, but they are.
Has there been discussion that Mount Nebo could at some point assimilate?
I don't think there's really been discussion.
Lack of a better word.
Yeah, assume would probably be a better word, but that contract would have to be, modified or signed over, or however they do it. I don't understand the legal sides of things. But yeah, that's the idea of where we're going. And so I think more than anything, Nebo's here just to look at the area and see what the needs are going to be, and try and put some framework in place to make things work for everyone. We're not trying to take water from one place and move it to another place. We're just trying to accommodate everybody's needs. And we're not miracle workers or anything. We're not going to make water just appear.
Not going to be.
It just doesn't appear. But we're trying to at least make some good judgment about how things can be done to protect water, to convert water as we go from agricultural to M&I uses, and I don't know how all that's going to fall out. We're not trying to be the person that does that. We just want to understand, in 40 years, Oak Ridge needs X amount of water. Where are they going to get it from? And if you don't need it, that's great. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like, most of those entities that are there, Springville, Spanish Fork, Payson, they all have surface water sources that they're looking at, where we really don't have any surface water up here, and Woodland Hills is in the same situation. Goshen, all that, or actually just Benjamin and Lakeshore and all that area, still surface water, and they probably have easy access to drilling wells and stuff would be pretty shallow there.
But there's a lot of things to think about here as we really talk about moving forward. As if we're just talking about, we understand all this unincorporated farmland is going to become a city. I don't know if it is. That's what happened in Salt Lake Valley. Is that what's going to happen in Utah Valley? If it does, then yeah, there was water there for the crops, so there's water there for the people, but it's not the right water. And so there's a lot of other things that could come into this planning. A municipal regional water treatment plant, all kinds of things that could happen out of this. We don't know yet, but that's why we're trying to get a basis as to where to go.
Right, so to bring that full circle back to Councilman Abbott's question, I guess you right now function mostly on wells and groundwater, and the question would be, are the neighbors just planning on using groundwater and wells as well? And if you are, is there enough? We're looking 60 years down the road, population growth here and there, and you're both dropping wells. Is there enough groundwater to accommodate that both? But each person, each group isolated on its own has a difficult time knowing if they're affecting what the neighbors are planning as well. And so the idea is to look at the whole thing, the whole ball of wax, whether that be surface water, groundwater, runoff, reuse, every different kind of resource that might be available in the next 60 years, and quantify that, and then quantify the demographic, maybe the population, 40 years to 2060, and say, does what we have for a finite element of water meet the needs of what we have for a population growth projection in 40 years? And if it doesn't, how do we get the water maybe from Mona or from X reservoir or the groundwater? How do we use that all together to meet everybody's needs? And are there projects that we need to do together to get water from here over to there to share with them so that we've all got access? And that's kind of the purpose, more the interconnection, not just everybody hunkered down on their own saying, we have enough water, we've got enough water, and we don't know if we're all planning the same resources.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so on the participation agency table, with the amount of money that Elkridge has already spent on our own water studies and planning, would that amount go towards our contribution of the total planning already, like Spanish Fork, Sailor?
Yeah, well, we've actually already done kind of a preliminary breakdown of what the cost might look like if all the different, not just the agency members, but also Elkridge and other entities participated. And in that, we assigned a value to any studies that have been done already. And so I can't tell you exactly what your amount's going to be because we've got to figure out who all is going to participate first. But we definitely know
to evaluate the value of their study.
I mean, we anticipate that Utah County, Goshen Valley Local District, and Central are going to bear the bulk of the cost of this. And so the city costs maybe somewhere in the range of $5,000 to $15,000 of the $280,000, and so that's much less than just your proportionate share of the cost, because those entities that have a much bigger planning need are going to be bearing the brunt of the cost.
And those that can.
So if, say, we join the agency, we do all these water studies, we find out Elkridge and Woodland Hills are both drawing from the same aquifer, our wells are in the same aquifer, and we have plenty of water. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, we envision that the agency may spur projects without ever even building its own projects. Or if a regional project is warranted, the agency members may decide we need to build an agency project. And so this study, out of the study, will come somewhat of a regional capital facilities plan that says we think that these regional projects will be needed, and whatever entities need the water from those projects, those are who are going to get together and build those projects. So your involvement, if the case that you just if the case you just laid out plays out, then there may not be a whole lot more involvement that you need to do in the future.
Yeah, that becomes probably because we are so limited in our source supply. We know water rights as opposed to water is a major factor in how all this plays out. And I understand, from my perspective, I think what's happening with Mount Nebo is probably a wise thing with the weakness that Sumwa still plays into this. We're still making payments to Sumwa. We continue to do that, and with our limited income source right now, to try and add on one more agency payment, that's probably almost the bottom line. Not that we don't need this information, we don't need to be a player. And I've expressed to you, I was really frustrated that we were invited after the fact to become a player. I mean, we're small, and I get that. We don't contribute a whole lot, we don't draw a lot by comparison to the others, but we need to figure out how do we fit into this, how do we afford to fit into this. We'll certainly make available the studies that we have.
Well, that's definitely beneficial.
And that, because it was a pretty expensive study that we all have already paid into.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of our frustrations as well, is we offered it to you guys, and they didn't want it.
Well, and
They didn't-
I don't know that they
So-
didn't want it. I don't know that communication happened the right way
Yeah.
to allow it to happen.
I think
Now,
that's
be
the
fair.
issue.
There's,
Yeah, we would love to have had it. We scoured everything that we thought, we knew was out there, and we just didn't know it was there.
is Mountain Land, an entity that would be involved in this at all? As far as-
Not really. We would definitely use, planning, population projection stuff,
Yeah.
from Mountain Land, but other than that, no.
So my question to you, I was at a meeting today with a number of other elected officials. Mayor of Woodland Hills asked me to get some contact information so he could reach out to you and provide you with the same information that we have, that they have, so that you can plug them into that. I mean, they'd like to hear from you. In fact, they would have been here tonight, but they had their own council meeting. You couldn't really change the
Yeah, I actually called them and he said, yeah, we don't need a presentation, we want to participate. I need to reach out to him.
Yeah, you need to reach out to him. So he's looking to share that information because, like us, they spend a fair amount of money, they've studied, they know where their water's coming from, their new well they drilled is pulling from the same aquifer that our primary well is pulling from, and we're aware that we're sharing that pooled asset, and the engineering firms have talked and shared that data, and it would certainly, I think if nothing else, if we provided you with that information, then as these other cities, whether we're a part of the discussion or not going forward, they can look at it and say, okay, well, these two cities here really can't pull water from down below to get it up to their cities. So we're going to let them pull from here, and we'll get our water from other resources that become available. I know, and back again to the canal, I know there's a lot of water that can move through that canal and will be moved through that canal to benefit those organizations. Spanish Fork, I think it's the Bonneville group or something. There's that other pipeline that runs through Mapleton and Springville, and that's kind of where that water access for them comes from. But, there is water out there. It's just whether or not it's usable for drinking versus outside irrigation.
Yeah.
If you're irrigating crops, you can certainly irrigate lawn with them. You can't necessarily go out and stick your cup in under the hose spigot and drink it and have it be potable.
Yeah, and that's where the regional planning comes into play, because the two sources you're talking about there, the Highline Canal is the Strawberry water that's brought through the canal. The additional water that Sumo's contracted for should actually come through a separate pipeline that's going to be constructed by the district. That's the ULS South pipeline that's actually in design phase right now. The first segment of that should start construction this fall or early next spring.
Where's that going to go?
There's an alignment in the environmental documents. I can't tell you exactly where it goes.
Is
but
it the ALS?
ULS?
ULS,
ULS, yeah. Utah Lake System
So they were
Pipeline.
not going to
Put it in the Highlight
they're
Canal.
not going to incorporate the two.
Not right now, they're not. Things could still change, but right now that's not the plan. One of the biggest, as we think about these things, just outside the box here, if you tried to put the Highline Canal water and the ULS water together in the canal, you're taking a very high quality water source from Strawberry Reservoir, which is in the pipe the whole way from Strawberry, instead of coming down Six Water and Diamond Fork and Spanish Fork River and all the silt and sediment and everything else that gets in it, and then mixing those back together. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to take a real high-quality water source and a not-so-high-quality water source and mix them together. And the other thing is exactly what we're talking about. We can irrigate lawns with that, but we can't irrigate people. And so for regional water supply, if we have to go to that plant, then that pipeline, the ULF pipeline, actually can become a municipal water supply pipeline instead of an irrigation pipeline. And so that's one of the reasons to keep those two separate. Doesn't mean it's gonna happen, that's just one of the possibilities.
Unless they're gonna start construction, it sounds like something at least is intended
Yeah,
to
but
go that
there's-
direction. And there's
It's
I
going
get it.
far enough, to get started, but changes can still be made.
Always do.
And you can still always divert water out of the pipeline into the canal too.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways to do that.
Okay. And then I've just got two more questions here related, you've got a list of entities that are affected by this. Where does Salem Canal, where do they fit into this mix? And you may not remember the full name, but it's like the Goshen Canal Irrigation. Are they part of that Goshen Valley District? Or is that a separate thing?
Well, there's a lot of irrigation companies that are affected by this area that we're reaching out to. We held a meeting for them, oh, man.
We've had a few meetings with them.
And we're trying to reach out to them again with the results of this initial study to see if they have any interest in participating in future discussion. And then, so like I say, we have calls out to them. We're just trying to get in touch with them.
So the culmination of all of these calls and the studies, hopefully we bring together so that we have those answers that we don't have now.
Correct.
Correct. The idea is to get everybody's input. It's not really a reach out to see how big of a budget we can get. It's a study to try and incorporate everybody's opinion, everybody's needs, everybody's future needs. And I think that's the idea, is to be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Okay. I'll make sure that we get contact, before you leave, make sure we get the contact information that you need, and we'll make sure Royce, if you'll help me remember that we can get that study.
Yeah, we can trade some PDFs. I'll get the study back to you, and you can send me a copy of your.
The agency meets again on the 22nd, 7:30 a.m. Monday morning, like they always do. As always, you're always welcome to be there. It's a public meeting. See if anything else goes on.
Cody's still been going on. I went for a few of them.
Cody went last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it 10:30 a.m.?
No,
7:30 a.m. Yeah, it's a struggle on a Monday morning too.
On a good day,
With my memory, it's not a great meeting
on a
time.
good day, Rick Moore brings donuts.
If we do that more often, we get there more consistently. Any other questions? We just mostly wanted you to understand what the agency was and where we're trying to go, and hopefully that can be something that we can commingle with your efforts and incorporate some of the stuff you guys have done, and hopefully some of the stuff we can do can help you guys too.
I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll have Brett get you contact information and we can work
Yeah,
that
we
way.
just want to reach back and check with Royce, and we'll get the information that we need and go from there. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome to
Appreciate your
stay,
time.
because it
We're
gets
gonna have to
exciting.
we're going to Goshen tonight.
We got another meeting in Goshen, so.
Okay.
Just know you had your chance.
Take a rain check.
I like it though.
Okay. Let's go to the next item, that's a landscaping code change. This is the attachment. Couple of different attachments. These are all the same, with these meant
Oh, those are for another issue.
for another issue, all of those.
Is it the nuisance code?
Yes.
Yeah, those are.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you have the landscape one?
I haven't got nothing.
I
don't know if
didn't
you have
have
a button
one.
longer
I
or not.
thought it was, yeah, but I didn't. I know I downloaded and looked at it. That was what Jim and Dale had been working on.
Do that next one while we're, making
Okay. Let's, how many of you had a chance to read through and look at that?
give a different perspective on this. You know, I think as we take a look at changing anything, a well-balanced approach is something we need to consider and see the perspective of other individuals as we work through this process, rather than just going in closed-minded and saying, this is what we think will work best, and take that input. So that's why I sent that out. I wanted that
Forward
information.
it on, I just got.
Yeah.
So I sent it to everybody else. I tried sending it to you, but apparently it's mayor@elkridgecity.org and not Al.
Yeah.
Found that out after, so.
Yeah, that's where I get in PDFs.
And
Did you staple those that quick?
see, actually, what we had done on this was looking at the ordinance that's already in place, you know.
Right, but if we're gonna tweak it any, it certainly, I
This,
think.
this is like anti-ordinance period, so,
Well,
yeah, I
but-
mean, that's what I got, but,
Right.
yeah.
to a certain degree, yes, but I think that, you know, it's a matter of representing everybody and
No,
and
it
having
was good,
that,
it has
that be
some
part of
good
the
points.
discussion. You know, I did go through the code. There are a couple of pieces that gave me heartburn. There were other parts that I thought I'm behind it 200%, because I think that the code ought to have these things. I was surprised that we don't. You know, like the backflow prevention device and the PRV valve going into all the sprinkling systems. I mean, the last thing we need is our water supply being contaminated because we didn't have something like that. I mean, they've had issues in Saratoga Springs and in a couple other communities here in the state where a backflow preventer would have kept that from happening. So,
You know, and one thing that I was looking at, even in presenting this, basically all of our development is going in on the north end, and that basically was cleared off of all natural vegetation to make it a nice hayfield before. You know, we built in the middle of the hayfield. There's not a tree inside of where I live. And that is, I think that, when he was looking at natural vegetation, I think, up on the hill, I think that is where that would apply, because and in fact, I would have loved to have had a lot that had all of the scrub oak already on it.
well, that's why I bought my lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had to try to develop that. But my thinking was, you know, and initially, I was thinking, hey, we can make a one pager out of this. But then, when you start looking at any changes, we either got to fund a total change of it. But it did address, you know, as I looked through it, and it addresses things like the animal rights and like air and then commercial and basically trees. And I think to me, it doesn't look like it's not a very intrusive change to the ordinance. What it is primarily requiring is a front lawn and 2 trees. You know, the front lawn would include a sprinkler system. It doesn't really address what kind of, whether they have rock walls in, or whether they have some xeriscape, or whether they, you know, a lot of and they're small lots. You know, that is not, you're not talking very much on a front yard,
No,
on
yeah.
a lot of the development that's going in. And I think what will happen, if you have no trees in a development that is a hayfield, it might be fine when they first move in, but you will find a rather unattractive area down the road 5-10 years. And that is what's happened, like in Lee Haskell's development there. I looked at that. There was about 6 houses that have been completed. There are 0 trees, you know, in the front. And 2 trees is not if everybody just put in the 2 trees, on those that are already, houses that have already been done, I'd like to see us just approach people when it comes time for the Arbor Day celebration that we have, that to be a Tree City USA there each year. We just request that they look at that and see if they would be willing to put in 1 or 2 trees. Those that are already done, you know, we really don't have a lot of say. But in my opinion also, the only time that you really, and with, that you really have any control over whether front yards are landscaped is prior to them moving in. Otherwise, you've got to be vindictive and pursuing people. It's like the letter was saying, you know. We aren't trying to find people or make criminals out of people. But it really isn't fair to say that I just like a natural look when there's no natural look there. Up on the top of the mountain.
There will be a natural.
I like the natural look. Yeah, there will be a natural look.
There will be.
It would be
But this allows for the natural look. In Part D, it says
you can have
xeriscape plantings and the utilization of native vegetation is encouraged in clusters on smaller and flatter terrain lots and allowed exclusively on slopes over 15%. Native vegetation, including for grasses and trees that are currently established in the non-developed hillside areas of the city.
Yeah.
So I think that,
There's,
you know what I mean?
you know, as I went through this, there are a couple of points. Just hear me out, okay? I was wondering first on this piece here with the corner lot.
Yeah.
The placement of the back line of the dwelling. I'm wondering if that is an accurate, because on the corner lot they come back 45 feet from each side, and then you have a 100-foot lot line that has to be viewable. You can put a 6-foot fence behind that, and so you don't have to go all the way back to the back corner. I'm wondering if that's one issue that I saw in this.
And I think we addressed that, didn't we? If it's behind the fence, then they don't have to.
But the diagram reflects.
Oh, I see.
I'm just saying for clarity.
Change the diagram.
You're gonna have that, okay?
If it is fence.
I think it does say though landscaping unless behind fence.
Yeah, but that's on an interior. Okay.
So you just want that clarification on the corner lot as well?
Yeah, I want the clarification. Okay.
No, that's fine. I think the
Because
clearer our code is, the better.
One of the biggest issues I have, quite frankly, with a lot of our code is we get so caught up in putting all these things into it, we don't have a way to enforce this. I mean, it's like, okay, so in section C, it says, a landscaping plan must be drawn, designed, and certified by a licensed landscape architect. I think that's a bit much.
Commercial, isn't it?
No, that's for residential and commercial. So
And D, it says that?
yes,
C.
C and C,
Okay.
okay? So, I mean, if they, yeah, I think that's probably a little much. I mean, if I decide that I want to put xeriscape in, or I want to go online and plot it out and figure it out, I mean, my yard, I took and I put it on a piece of grid paper and I drew it out, and then I took my plans into Mountain Land Supply over in Orem, and they drew up a sprinkler diagram thing and parts list, and I paid them and they delivered the stuff, and that worked. But I didn't pay an architect to do it.
That's because what happened, I can tell you what happened here, is because this was all commercial, and then
We added
we
residential.
added in
Okay.
residential, but
So-
what we need to do is just make
Something
Like-
that.
B2, just add in another
Okay.
section for residential, so this would apply to commercial, and then you have the separate.
Yeah, I
I think it's
for
for
clarity,
landscape
okay.
plan be drawn
All
on,
right.
but I don't think
Okay.
an
And
architect.
then in section G, where it talks about trees, shall have a or minimum of 2-inch caliber trunk and be,
1.5.
well, it says, and I'm not sure if the strike through means that they have to be in a pot versus burlap.
Yeah, see, we.
And I reached out to horticulturist, and he said actually it's better if the trees are fresh dug and burlap brought in, and then the burlap's removed. They transplant a whole lot better than if you take them from a pot where the roots have been spinning circles.
Yeah, I agree, and that was what was in there before, is that they all
Yeah.
have to be potted.
And-
And we were saying, we eliminated that.
Sometimes they go in with a tree spade or do other things.
Yeah.
Then on section I, says it will be a Class C misdemeanor with all the applicable penalties and fines. Are we talking daily, monthly, yearly? You know, somebody, it doesn't get it in by the end of June, do we go on the 15th of July, sorry, you've now violated the code 15 times, subject to whatever the fine is? and find them.
Well, I think if we do enforce things, haven't we all agreed that it's only by complaint?
Well,
Like, I don't think you
I'm
keep
just
the
saying, if
book.
you're gonna put that in there, you gotta be
Yeah,
clear,
you need to define it,
and then,
define it that there's
Just
a
define.
maximum or.
The penalty is a daily penalty or weekly penalty, or just define the penalty.
Okay.
because quite frankly, there are gonna be people that are gonna look at that and say, just like they did with Obamacare, I'm gonna pay the fine instead of buying the insurance, because it's cheaper to pay the fine than to buy the insurance.
Yeah.
So we need to be, that's another point, okay?
That's-
Now,
that's what.
okay, section J.
Do that.
Landscaping shall be kept visually free of insects. You know, when locusts come in and you go out, I mean,
Right.
Bring in the seagulls.
I don't know how I'm ever gonna be able to be compliant with
Cicadas
that.
or whatever, that
Or
we're
Yeah,
all
see, that
over
was-
the
I
That was one that was in there.
It's in there, I'm just
we wanna
saying-
strike some of those.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I look at that, and
That was
then
not-
there's a section down here, all unhealthy or dead plant materials shall be replaced within 6 months or the next planting period. You know, I've had some trees that looked really rough after the cicadas came through, and they're still alive because it took the time to nurse them back to health, and it took more than 6 months. Because
But the
I
dead-
was attached to
Dead
those
ones
trees.
is what we're
The
looking
the
at.
dead ones, yeah, but it says unhealthy.
Okay.
Well, this is what our current
Okay.
code is. This is why it's good that
That's-
we're doing
that's-
this, because.
That's
it's
why
like,
I'm having
This
this,
is what we're supposed to enforce, and we have silly things like, I mean, we all have box elder
Okay.
bugs.
and we
You
You know
did,
what I mean?
Yeah.
Having, there's
This is why
there's periods
This
of
is
time
so
you
that
can't keep it out.
so that we can actually enforce what we want to enforce.
No, so that you can read it and understand it. Because right now, you're like,
You know, one of the,
it's,
that's got my problem.
We were
Timing
just,
makes- Timing makes a good point. Can't we get it down to one page? No. I hate to tell you that, but the probability is because of all the ifs and whys, and there are so many variables coming from so many, and the reason we have codes is because there are so many variables that someone's gonna take an exception to. We get the lawsuit, we get the complaint, we now, okay, all right, let's tweak that one under.
This
and
didn't
it's
solve that.
yeah, and I do have just one other point here on A1. Have we, what, yeah, A1, this is the part where we talk about how they have to have this in and
The
and so on.
bond?
Yeah, bond and all
Okay,
that.
but my question is this, you know, when you make a mistake and you learn from it, that's one thing, but when you make the same mistake more than once, shame on you. I know I'm not saying that we necessarily made a mistake, but I think we can avoid I'd like to get some input from the developers and people that are building these homes, because quite frankly, when the sprinkling system ordinance was put into place on the homes, there's a section right next to our town that's in Salem City, and it stayed there because the cost to put that system in, it was money out of the developer's pocket. So if we push this and they come in and now all of a sudden, what's it gonna do and how could that potentially impact the number of homes that are sold and things? I mean, we just need to consider the big picture. I would at least be curious to see what they think about it, because, you know, we may end up with a bunch of developments that all of a sudden have for sale signs on them and they're gonna sell them to someone else because their profit margins just went out the door. Because they're gonna try and absorb some of this into the cost of the home, they will.
well, like I pointed out before, we already, they were selling those lots before with $3,000 to $4,000 for a secondary water system. And it seemed to be fine, you just put that into their price. We eliminated that, which basically frees up $3,000 to $4,000 to be selling for the same price than it was
well,
before.
that's what paid for the trip to Mexico and to Hawaii for the employees.
Yeah.
Well, no, I
Yeah,
just,
I
They
agree.
just go back.
I
What
think
we
we
did
should at
actually-
least get input from them
Yeah, well,
through this
And you
process,
know-
because,
and you know that their
Well-
input will be preferable, that we don't have any landscape requirements on here.
That's
you
all.
know,
well,
That's all
I
that
don't think,
I've been
I don't
stated.
think our city planning should be dependent upon what the developers want. We
Yeah.
need to decide as a city
Right.
what is best
What
for the
we-
city,
what we want it to
irregardless
look
of
like.
the developers and the
What we want it to look
developments.
like.
yeah, well, I
And-
don't want them
and
pulling
so-
up and just walking away either.
They won't, they won't.
No.
So, and, I mean, me and Dale talked about the amount a lot, because, you know, if you pass it on to developers, they're gonna pass it on to the homeowners, and the homeowners are either gonna pay it up front, which is gonna be in their mortgage, and they'll pay it over 30 years, or they're gonna have to come up with the money in 2 years to get that landscaping done, which is currently required by the code. And the problem that we're having is people build these houses to the maximum amount of their income, and then they cannot
They can't afford to do it.
save
can't
and
save.
afford
You
to
can't
get that
save
money
$3,000 or
together
$4,000.
within 2 years to put in their lawn.
It's
And so the
expensive.
neighbor who took the money, the time to save and put in their lawn because it was expected within the 2 years, and then their next door neighbor doesn't do it, then they're irritated because all those weeds are blowing over and causing weeds in their yard. And then we have this constant battle between neighbors and with the city, and the city having to try and enforce it and get them to do anything. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve, is we're spending so much time. It's like the #1 complaint in the city is yards that are not.
Well, how
But
much
is
does
it
it
coming
cost
from-
per mower?
Is it coming from the older part of town, or is it coming specifically from the new part? Because my awareness and most of what I'm hearing is from the older part of town, where they want to strong arm the neighbors into having
Well,
the same yard they have.
That's because all that new part of town has the PUD, and they put in their front lawns and their trees and their trails and their parks, and they have much more than any of us up in this other section.
But the part that wasn't, we've had complaints.
Yeah.
The neighbors they're irritated
Well, that
It
was-
almost needs to be,
when another one's not done. And so this is how we thought, if it's just required to be put in before you get your occupancy permit, then we're gonna eliminate that
The majority
complaint.
of
A
that.
huge, a majority of those complaints from the city, from here on forward, and it frees up our code enforcement officer to spend his time on other issues in the city. And so whether people are gonna pay for it in 2 years, or they're gonna pay for it when they buy their house, they've gotta pay for it either way. And
Well,
so,
if they can't pay for it when they're buying their house, like if they're buying the next they're not gonna be able to cough up the
It
$1,000,
is hard to
you
come
know,
up with
$2,000-3,000.
save.
I mean, I don't, our backyard cost us like $12,000 to put in because we had to do a retaining wall. I'm just thinking like, if we built to the max of what we could never afford that.
And-
So it might be smart, because then it's what, $20 more a month?
yeah, and it's less than that, I think, me and Del. We
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
did
you
the
did?
calculations when we were
it's
doing this.
usually a little less than, it would be.
And like Salisbury just put grass in for us, and we ended up digging out a lot of that grass and putting curbing in, and it didn't hinder anything that we wanted to do to it. You know what I'm saying? They just did bare bones.
Yeah.
So if you want to go back and do more and put rocks in and stuff, that's all up to you. But at least
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
covering bare bones.
That's kind of where I'm at on this. It's like, okay, I think we do need to have some landscape. I mean, it's don't let, we build a house and rather than just letting the weeds grow and the blow seeds all over the place, our city should have landscape yards to prevent that from happening. I'm not really one to say what you have to do, right, to landscape it, other than it needs to be landscaped. It needs to be grass, it could be xeriscape, it could be whatever that is, but
And that,
if you don't want a tree, that doesn't affect my yard, because as long as the weeds are down, and I don't have to, I'm okay with that.
they can't
I'm not in
affect
a
the
big-
city though.
I'm not in a big dictating what you have to do to meet the requirement, but
You're
I
saying just grass and that.
think, yeah, if somebody wants a.
Or xeriscape, or
Something
just
like
let people
xeriscape.
decide, but it just has to be landscape.
Something has to
There
be,
has
other
to,
than just
there needs to be
natural vegetation.
some type of a landscape
of rocks.
plan that can meet the concerns that we have, which is the weeds blowing into a neighbor's yard, that sort of a thing. But as far as, again, like you're suggesting, dictating certain kinds of trees, and only 6 kinds of trees that we can have in the city.
Yeah, I think.
I like the suggestion.
I think that's great,
Well,
because those were good
They're great
suggestions.
suggestions.
Well, those were put in the codes
They were.
originally specifically for the
PUD.
park strip
Yeah.
between the sidewalk and the road, so that we didn't end up down the road with the city having to come back in and replace the city sidewalks.
Oh,
Sure,
because the
because they
trees
break
get
up.
Because
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
That's why those trees were
Okay.
specific.
And that's okay, if you wanted to leave that for that park strip, is
Yeah.
the rest of your
Well,
yard's
see, that's-
fine.
Yeah, and if-
That is what I
That's
was
what that
looking at in
says.
here
It's
too,
for the
is
park strip.
we've got park strips in all of the new development, everything that's going in. And those are just blank, some are putting rocks in, fine, put rocks in, but a couple of trees. And lawn is basically, lawn and a sprinkler system is all we're really requiring here. That we're not requiring them to put in curb and gutter, or curbing and
My question,
mulching.
Dale, is if someone wants to put in a xeriscape, do they still have to have their sprinkler system in there if they're gonna do you know.
The one guy down in the self-help homes has his just with, his whole front yard is just moss. Just rocks and moss and stuff. And actually, I think that, he probably is compliant, you know, as,
And
Yes.
and he
It's not
probably
what-
has a very nice yard compared to.
Not what I personally would want,
Yeah,
But-
but if that's what they want
but
to do.
hey,
but that's where they have a plan, somebody have a plan.
But that's what I think, even if somebody draws their plan and brings it in, and then it just is for approval, and as long as,
but
it
there
doesn't
has
have to be to what we want,
The
I
balance.
mean, it just has to have the basic, right? I mean,
It has to conform.
it has to
a-
conform to this, to whatever we decide to
The
put in here.
intent behind it is this, does it conform to that? But who then gets to decide, does it conform? That's why you have to keep writing these individual little mandates. That's the problem we've got.
Yep.
So, if we could find a good way to do that, that's the issue.
yeah.
Most zero-skipping still requires some sprinkling system, though.
Most of it does.
But the problem is,
Yeah.
Or
but the
not.
problem is it required something underneath, ground cloth or something,
Yeah.
right?
See, and actually.
Is that in here?
Oh, it does?
See, in that ground
Well,
cloth
if not,
makes a
what
huge
prevents the
difference.
weeds from coming all through all that?
It doesn't through mine unless I pay an exorbitant price for the right kind of ground cloth.
I don't know.
You
Yeah.
don't
Well,
get
that
it-
stuff,
you don't-
that
get it
stuff
for
erodes
free.
after a little while. I mean, it doesn't last forever anyway.
Yeah, just weed guard is not.
Weed
No,
guard's not
it's
gonna
not.
cut it.
down.
And
Or
then-
plastic.
And then you're,
No, no.
You gotta get the actually.
professional landscape
Cloth.
cloth
Whatever
is
it is.
far more expensive
Yeah.
than what you get from Home
It's
Depot.
more expensive.
But it
than
lasts for
garbage.
20 years.
Yes.
And, has a 20-year guarantee. And it does keep the weeds down. This other, the other type, if there's a hole in the plastic, the weeds come through. And that one that has, just the light gauge weeds grow through that very nicely. And so
Yeah, right.
you need that. But you look at what has been done, on those that are required to do it, like the self-help homes, they have, most of them have some xeriscape, they have a gravel parking area down to one side, and that little lawn, in the front, a sprinkler system, and they go to the back if they're on a corner. You know, it is a pretty minimum, to meet the landscape requirement. It's a minimum, and I think where the complaints come in is where there's nothing done. You know, there's no grass and not a peat,
I think two
or
big
no
things,
gravel
right?
or
It's the
anything.
weed, the uncontrolled weeds,
Yeah. Looks like a
and
drug house.
persistent weeds, and the other thing is probably erosion.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want the
Yeah,
dirt
on the side,
going
yeah,
across the
that's
sidewalks or
right.
something like that in a rainstorm or something like that,
Jim,
so.
Jim and I spent quite a bit of time, just, initially, we were thinking we'd just rewrite a short, a short section, and you start looking at cost, rewriting a new ordinance, and we decided, well, okay, let's look at this and see what's in it already, and it looked like it addresses a lot of things that I think probably were addressed back when this was put in place. There was it in 2010 or something, and before that.
And then in section A, I'm in violation of that section at my house. I'm surprised my neighbor across the street has called the city.
What do you
Come up
mean?
there,
I'll call
because
him.
the thing says at the end that I have to landscape all the way to the road.
Oh, yeah.
That's
On
40
us that
feet
don't have
of
any,
city property that I'd have to landscape.
Yeah.
That's why I haven't called. Haven't called, you haven't called, Schallenbergers haven't called.
I have 40 feet of city property
Yeah.
that's not
You,
landscaped.
everyone from you all the way to Bexley.
Yeah, get on the ball.
No, here,
That's like free yard that you've got. You can look
But
like
wait,
you
what
got a
about,
state.
can't you get something from this right here on lots larger than half an acre? Can't you do what you want?
Because
it's
the
not
asphalt,
visible from the
because
road.
the asphalt was poured by the city and left an area that is still city property. That's city responsibility. It isn't ties.
Oh, it, well, then you shouldn't
The
have to.
technicality is not, and so it
But
becomes,
But the way the code is written,
Yeah.
it makes it.
I'll call him.
All
But
the way-
we
all the
could
way.
just write to the road, comma, or city property line.
well,
So is
I
that
mean,
the
and that would clear it up.
The
but
easement-
does that mean like,
Then the city's in
I can come
violation.
back in 9 feet and say,
It's a
I'm
noxious
gonna
weed.
water
Not
9 feet?
including your easement, not including the
Well, that's
easement.
city property though.
Oh,
And
man.
Well, I send the city bill.
So, let's start summarizing where we need to go.
So what, from here, yeah.
To my feeling is, number one, let's identify why the code exists. What is the code in hopefully intending to accomplish? If we know that, then we can better able decide, okay, we're taking care of noxious weeds, we're taking care of, is it just an unsightly thing?
Well, it's a fire danger in the summer, isn't it?
That's right, the fire, and so we need to address those issues. What is the purpose of the code in the first place? What do we want to accomplish with this? I like the concept of if we can somehow get it into C of O, occupancy. I like that concept because now it's done. And that becomes a separate issue from the rest of the city that's already in place.
Yeah.
Even though the code is still there, which we're now going to have to go back and look, because how many people are in violation throughout the city? A lot are. A lot have continued to try and do some things. So if we start at that point, let's take a look, I hate to say, but let's take a look again and decide how can we address what was the purpose, what was the function of this code. But I think we have to. Once we have done that, let's start from square one. Here's the problem we're trying to address. Now how can we effectively do it within what we have with modifications, deletions, additions, whatever it takes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a part of it is that a primary part, in my mind, is just you decide what you want the city, your city, to look like.
But there becomes a problem with that. What do I want the city to look like?
Yeah.
What do you want the city to look like? What do you want the city to look like? And,
Well,
and,
but
and
most
I
people are
get
gonna
that.
agree, I mean, there's
Well, I don't
a low
disagree.
standard, just grass or
Yeah,
whatever.
we don't want a bunch of garbage that's piled up. We don't want a bunch of dog droppings left all over the place that draw in the flies, that create a health hazard, that create.
I mean, it's not slippery slope though, like, I think there is a line,
The
don't
UT,
you?
a homeowners association, we're okay to do that because they bought into it.
Yeah.
But in the city, we've got a little bit of a different issue here. I don't disagree. I
Yeah.
want this
That's
place.
one of the things.
I would love to say that everybody wants to come here because this place is just nice. It's clean. It's healthy. It's livable. But what's livable for one and livable for another? I went back home. You still got this on tape? I went back home down to where I grew up, and I went through the town that's nearest to where I grew up, and I thought, holy cow, Redneck City. Holy cow.
That's what
I had forgotten it looked like, but I grew up with it. And I didn't turn out too bad. So,
That's slippery slope.
That's up for debate.
that's why, yeah, the odds there.
You turned out good.
So, I don't disagree with the concept, but we've got to be careful with the concept.
Well, I think, this is what I'm gonna draw an analogy here. I used to be a finance clerk for my religious organization, and I couldn't figure out why I still had to write checks out by hand. And I was talking with the computer people, and they said, well, we have to accommodate the lowest common denominator. We have to make it so that it functions across the board for everybody. And I think that's what we need to do here. We need to have something that is the lowest common denominator, one that works for everybody, that is reasonable and prudent, not one that forces somebody that says, you know what, I'm like, there's no way I can do this. I'm going to have to sell my house and move.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to existing residents, new, they know what they're buying into, much like you said with the homeowners associations. But keeping in mind that we have an area that was created and set aside specifically for that type of thing, and then the housing market crashed, and now it's just smaller lots with lots of homes, because their homeowners association dissolved. So we just need to.
Okay.
Okay, so can I just make a comment on this?
Please.
I mean, I think this is what we've done with this code. With the exception of adding in the paragraph with requiring the certificate of occupancy permit, the landscaping done before that, and then adding the PRV valve, which I think we're all in agreement that that needs to be in, so we don't contaminate water.
It's
I mean,
not a PRV, it's a,
backflow prevention and the PRV on the,
that's quite different.
And
Yes,
actually,
they
It
are.
should require
But-
both, because
yes,
that's a
so-
conservation,
yes, conservation and a,
safety issue.
PRVs are put in
Safety.
anyway, on at least to the homes, but not necessarily to a sprinkler system.
yeah, with a sprinkling system allows.
if I'd had
Yes.
one line, I wouldn't have spent $300 rebuilding my manifold and
Right.
sewage
You know,
pressure surge.
When I saw my sprinkler turn off and the water squirted out from it, I knew I had too much pressure. Pull my
So-
valves up.
And
But,
so-
okay, but I think, I mean, we've added in those two little things. Other than that, we've taken out things, but it's basically the code as it is with those two minor, I mean, I guess it's not minor additions, the occupancy permit is not minor, but other than that, the code is how it is with those additions. And I mean, we've talked about this before, me and Dale have spent a lot of time, then Dale and Jim, because they're great at landscaping, went and modified this. I mean, we can keep on continuing to talk about it, but I mean,
Yeah,
we
we
had a
need to set
discussion here
time
tonight,
for
like,
that.
oh, scratch that and add that in. I think we just need to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying, let's find out for sure, does this comply with the purpose of the ordinance in the first place?
I
You
some
think
it
the
does.
purpose is?
That's what I want to
Some
know.
of it,
And
some
that's
of
what
it we
I'm
need to
saying,
cut out.
there are some aspects of it, you know, some of it is just so that you're aesthetically pleasing to your neighbor. Is that a purpose for landscaping? Or is it aesthetically pleasing to you?
Landscaping types of
And-
insects and seeds, we could take that stuff out.
There are some
Right.
things, you know, the bug thing, we need to scratch, the easement to your
Maybe-
property.
Yeah.
Maybe each of
concept.
us go through like Nelson's
Yeah.
done, and circle those, and then let's put it together, and, you want the right
Yeah.
statement on.
Well,
I'd like to
Not
see,
necessarily, but we need to understand what is the function.
I think
purpose
basically
of
that,
code.
they wrote a little
I-
statement that,
Isn't that what we've already done? Everybody's kind of given their input. I think we should scratch this, add this little comment in here. I think
And
that's
be
what
done
we've
with it.
done.
That's what you're saying.
Let's just be done with it. I
But we
mean,
do need to have one person collate the whole thing.
and that's fine.
Why don't I ask each of you to go through and instead of using this, maybe use Dale's copy,
yeah,
his and Jim's
yeah, because
copy.
it highlights,
Then
it
we
shows
can
it.
come
red.
back
That's red lines.
and you highlight, you underline, you delete, you add, and give it back to Dale.
Okay.
Dale and Jim, if you will relook at that and prepare it as, quote, a final document to be presented to the city council, 2 councils from now.
So we'll have a public hearing, we're changing the code.
It would have to be a public hearing. So you really want it before then so that it can be passed
So
back
Yeah,
out.
next week we
Let's
bring
do it
it.
for next.
Let's do it for next council meeting.
Next
Yeah,
council meeting.
Okay, and have it out so that the council can review it so that this much time is not spent on it.
Yeah.
Next time,
Yeah, that's true.
public hearing, we'll go from
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. City property rezoning planning commission. None of you were at planning commission, were you?
No, I didn't, I was not.
We get 2 of our planning commission members here. Thank you for that, by the way. I think that's very positive. I was to planning commission, and the intent behind, a lot of things happened, but the way it should have been presented was, does the city's presentation of the what we want to do with that property, does it comply with city code? That's the planning commission's duty, as opposed to, what do you think? And we did a, what do you think? And we got a lot of what they thought. And it was, I think it was a well discussed meeting. Would you 2 agree?
Yes.
Okay. So, let me summarize, and if I'm off a little bit, maybe you can help just a little bit. We came forward with that general presentation that we would rezone the red house area and the other acreage as commercial. We would subdivide and rezone those 4 lots and prepare those for sale and sell those now two sections. And those were some of the dollar figures we put out there, recognizing that those were probably pie in the sky a little bit, but hopeful that that would be probably the outside limit that we might be able to do something with, and that we would retain the 4.71 acres for an undetermined purpose at this point. And the first comment out of any of the planning commission was that they're very, very disappointed in the city from one of the commission members, because they always envisioned that we still put in some kind of a civic center, a park there, and then make it a very, very attractive central focus of our city's function. And I've had lots of discussions since then. The residents who came, of course, and not to demean any one of them, I had quite a good discussion with one of them even again today. But there was 2 of them in particular who said, I would have never bought here if I had known that park was not going in. I was told and promised, and I was shown the plans for the park. They were on paper, and I said they might have been on paper, but they were never planned. And if it's not an official document, it doesn't exist. And if someone promised you that, whether it was inferred by the city or by your developer, I'm sorry. That is the way things work. I want to see, I would prefer to see a city center there with a nice park or something. But the reality is, we've got to find the money to put it in the first place, whether we're talking just about park space and amenities, splash pads and basketball courts and whatever it is we choose to have. We've got to find those dollars, and then we have to maintain them. And that's an expense. Where are we going to get those dollars? How long do you want to wait to get it? So we talked about a lot of those issues, and of course Ruth Kupferman said, but as soon as those 4 lots are sold, my view is gone. And again, not to demean them, I said, one of the problems we've got is a view for the few. That's, I don't want anybody blocking my view.
Well, then why not behind you?
And you see, but they were promised, and that was the concept, that there would be nothing there but a park. And otherwise we would have never moved here. For a couple of them. And I said, I get that, and I understand your frustration, and I don't blame you for being frustrated. You get a promise, it can't be fulfilled. So, what I think
The promise was not from the city though, so the city
in the
doesn't have the
technical sense,
obligation.
no, but and that's what I try to help them to understand. If it's not platted, if it's not recorded, if it's not a contract, it doesn't exist. Whether it's an ideal concept or not doesn't matter. The reality is we sometimes have to change things. We've done it a lot. We've changed a lot of things, a lot of plans from previous administrations. We change it because it makes sense. We hope.
Sometimes we have more information or things. I mean, Escalante, when I moved up here, was gonna go straight through and connect, and it was gonna go up and tie right into Hillside, and now there's a house right where the road was gonna be.
So lots of things.
And I think our biggest change with this is the HOA went defunct, and Elkridge City then had to take over the 11, 13 acres of the park. And so now we have these acres up here that we were planning for the park, but we have more than doubled the current acreage in our park by having to take over that park and maintain it.
But now we can't afford that. We can't.
And that's the issue that we've discussed over and over, is just the maintenance cost on the parks We currently don't have that in the budget.
Well, we don't have it in the budget, so my question to them was, you help us figure out how we can pay for these things. If we could get economic development, I know I keep bringing it up, but it's a reality. If we could get economic development that could generate $150,000, $200,000 annually, then we could probably afford it.
So let me ask, I'm just gonna put this out here as a thought process. Those 4 lots, we own the lots. Can we go in and record an item associated with it that says these are all to be 1-story homes with a basement?
Well, I'm sure we
I
can
mean,
choose
can't we
to
do
do that, but
I mean, that if we
sure
chose
we
to.
could. Sure we could.
Yeah, but that would
The
limit
value's a
the
lot.
value
Yeah,
of the
it's
lot
the
immensely.
price of that value instead of being whatever it's going to be.
Well, I know, but I'm just,
But it's the same thing. Okay, so all these people that are built around where they want to put in a retirement community up here, right? Everybody who has their houses around there can then come and say, well, we were never told that a retirement community was going to go in here. And I would have never built my house here knowing that a retirement community was going to be right next door to me. So, I mean, we as a city, we can't go and please this person and then this person and then this person. I
And I
mean,
get
we
that.
have to do what's best for the city.
So what I want to ask is, what is it the city really wants? We wanted this concept, and then we saw, man, we can hurry and we can sell the property we're out there. Is that the basic function that we want to go for? Is it just being out of debt what we want? Or do we want to provide amenity, a nice, for example, let's say we could, in some point, we go down there and we build a nice civic center. I just come out of Mapleton, for example. Some of you have been there. Very nice facility, a little over what we would need. They rent out their hall, if you will, for weddings and such. I don't know what they're charging, but other places around here will charge as much as $1,500 an event. If we did that, for example, and some of the people brought up the idea with the New Payson Temple, we're getting a lot of people wanting to come to these places. A wedding I went to the other night, I know they paid $2,500 just to rent the facility along with some amenities that went with it. What if we did that 52 times a year? There's $70,000.
But how much
A
does it
year.
cost to build it?
That's the point.
I mean, and are we gonna do it 52 times?
No, I'm not
I'm
saying
just
we
trying, you know what
are.
I mean, like, is
And,
that,
and all I'm saying is, let's throw out the whole picture and decide if this is what we want to get rid of debt, let's get rid of debt. Let's go ahead and tell the planning commission, does it comply? We'll move ahead.
Well,
That's all I'm asking.
part of our purpose there, I mean, we were saving 4.5 acres. If we wanted a really big, just city center, we still could potentially put a really big city center with a parking lot for that purpose on those 4.5 acres.
I just don't want a civic center to be built, and then every year it's losing $70,000, and people are like, why would the city council approve that? You know what I'm saying? Because then they're gonna be more mad, because now instead of getting out of, why did they sell the land and get out of debt? That's what they're gonna
that's
say.
what we will have if we put a park in right now. We will be
Well,
losing
well,
money because it's
and
gonna
I get
cost us
that.
more.
Like, I'm just trying to, you know.
Is being out of debt for your kids, how old are your kids?
My youngest is 3, my oldest is 12.
And when they're a little bit older,
I don't want them cursing at me because we didn't make a smart choice. We still have land. We
they'll
still
still
have
curse. Is
land.
it Ty, share your thoughts.
So,
Save
you
me
know,
for therapy.
I mean, I'm probably one of the most fiscally minded person on the planet, I'm sure. You might find that out later.
No, you've
tonight.
never met Chris.
Okay, we're gonna pretty tight race here, I'm telling you.
But I also
Nobody's
want,
disagreeing with that.
but I don't want that to impair a vision either.
That's what I'm asking.
So I look at this and I say, I look at this building. What are we, is this big enough? Is this town council room big enough for our city? No, it's not. So do we renovate this or do we do something different? Because in my mind, when I look at this vision, I say to myself, you know, I can see this building just be left the way it is, basically, and become the public works building or the public safety building, right? Where the fire department, and eventually we'll have a little, we use the office as one for maybe the cop that we have here full time, because we're gonna have to get there at some point in time, or an office for the fire chief, or whatever. And have a building that we have, a town center, a town hall, with a new area for us to meet as a city, and it's a larger area. Multi-function. It may even have and I'm thinking phases here. I'm not saying we go out and build a huge building, but can we phase this in? And a senior center, volunteer center, where they can come down and play bingo. I don't know what our residents want to do.
Is playing bingo considered volunteer work now?
Well, whatever it is. and eventually a civic center. You know, I just look at this and say, this building is not sufficient for the needs of Elkridge.
No, it's not. But is selling the 4 lots going to make it so we can't do that in the 4 acres?
See,
no, I'm not saying. I'm not even sure we get rid of.
Please understand, this is that right now those payments are going to be made because of our sales tax. It's on a sales tax basis. It's not made because there is any debt liability to that property.
So here.
So I just want to. How do we?
In 7 more years, it's paid off.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Regardless, it'll be
7-8 years, it's paid off.
I think the 4 lots
would pay off.
We can get rid of those. Those don't. I'm not sure where they fit in. Where the house is now, right now, that may be a better option to keep and utilize for that, with the park going around, towards the, down where we have the 4.71.
I'll just tell you my thinking on when we were kind of deciding what to do with this property. I looked at it like, okay, do we need the full amount of the property? And if so, what for? And a lot of it was designed for park space, which in my opinion, we just don't need that park space since we picked up those additional 11 acres below.
Especially if we really develop those other acres to its potential.
Yes. And where we have them, we might as well develop them to their potential and put the money in there. So we don't need the park space. So a civic center would still be great. A cemetery is another possibility. So my thought in this is, if we can sell enough of the property to retire the bond, and we're currently paying $77,000 a year on that. So if we retire the bond, we take that $77,000 a year for the next 7 years and save it up, there's a big down payment for a cemetery or a civic center or whatever we want to decide we want to do with that land. But at this point, if we continue to just pay on it, then we're down the road. I don't think we need all of that property. I mean, in my mind, there's not been anything presented or anything that I can think of that we would need that amount of land for, based on what we already have in Elkridge. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Are more people mad about the four lots being sold, or do they think we're going to sell off the 4 acres? Like, what's
the concern? The loudest concern was they were expecting a nice property.
Okay.
And now it's not going to be there with this concept.
Because that's what I heard. There was going to be a huge park down here with a splash pad. And
Ulbrichts.
Okay.
And we can put a splash pad in phase 2. We can put one back over here. I mean, we've got some options. We really do that we can utilize it some other way.
Would a civic center block their view that much?
If we put it where the red house is, no.
Oh, if we put it over here?
And that's where it's always been intended to be. Take that red house down, put up a nice
so we wouldn't do
two-level,
with the
actually,
commercial.
A basement with a raised first level, a visual across the open valley. It'd be pretty.
It would be beautiful.
It
would.
Would
we still have room to do a cemetery too, potentially, or would it be one or the other?
Let's not worry about the cemetery for now.
Well, so we have 4.5 acres and the house is on 2 acres or an acre? We're combined together, 2 acres, right?
It's 2.
It's
almost
right
2.
at 2
Almost 2.
acres.
Yeah.
Not quite, just under.
1.2, 78, so just a little over 2.
One of the
No,
problems
97,
with
1.97.
just holding that, just those for the house, that 2 acres, that really doesn't give us enough for parking. Which we
So we have to
legally
go into-
have to have.
yeah,
We'd
sure.
have to retain some of the 4.71 acres if we were to sell off those other 4 lots. And if we could sell them instead of for 110, if we could sell them for 90, that's closer to what those other lots is going for. So that's 280,000. That reduces our 500,000 by just slightly over half.
If we just sold
It
the 4.
still doesn't take away the $77,000 a year. That will still continue to be paid until the bond is paid.
It would just make it paid off
Shorter.
sooner.
Short it up.
Start savings,
So if we sold those 4 lots though, we have to clear that loan?
No? No.
We checked
And
on
that's
that.
something I mentioned last time, and so that just for clarity's sake,
We had talked about
this
that before.
bond is based on a sales tax income bond as opposed to any collateral that this
I see,
would hold
okay.
itself.
Yeah.
If we can sell it, we can do anything we want to it because technically we hold title to it.
My thinking is that, too, just from, being property owners around there, basically, you're looking at, even to build maybe an initial reception center, you know, you're $600,000-700,000, I would think, into
Yes.
that. And we don't have that type of money, you know, coming in. That would have to be over a period of years.
It would.
Would they rather just let it set like it is?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
That was
And,
their expression, wasn't it?
That, well, that's
But,
one
I mean,
thing to
it-
consider. We do have, initially, it was, the main reason that they bought the whole thing was for getting park space, because we only had the little park here, that's only a couple of acres. And, but then, actually, we have more than 13 acres down there when you count that center strip that
That's
has
about 14 acres down
about
there.
14 acres.
Plus phase one.
Yeah, plus phase one.
We're about
See,
16 acres apart
Yeah.
down in that area.
It's 3.9, I think, in that
16, 17.
phase one. And so actually, we added, like Renee was saying, we have added, we have more than tripled or fourfold our existing
So,
market.
So, can I just throw out a number? So if we retired the bond, $77,000 a year for 7 years is $539,000. That's a lot of money to put toward a really nice civic center. And at that price, I mean, if we have that much to put towards it, we may be able to rent it out enough to cover the payment.
And if it was
Or the-
also used as like the city offices and whatever, because then we can justify it.
There's so many things that could be done in a nice civic center. You can do some agriculture classes, you know. There's a lot of things that are optional for us. We could have events going on and off all the time, but to rent it out even just for receptions, or if we want to have a nice big meeting where everybody can yell at the mayor.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Plenty of room
Yeah.
with a nice sound system.
That's what, because we were gonna get it going live, right? So they wouldn't actually be here.
So,
You're wanting to know, should we move forward or just table it? What, and is just selling just these 4 lots right here on the table, is that something?
That's an option.
I
Well-
mean, because then we still have all of this for the vision, right? No?
Right, yeah, so we had originally said sell the 4
But
lots
that would be
plus
off the bond.
the red.
No, but we don't have to pay off the bond with that money either. We can put it towards
Putting in
Our
putting in a
civic center.
facility.
you could actually do that. We could continue paying the $77,000. It's already being funded through sales tax, and we're getting a little more sales tax every year. It goes up a little bit, and you could put that, whatever we sold it for, you could start putting it into.
Depending on what that interest rate is and what we could borrow at, that rate may be low enough that we need money ahead to keep paying on that and use money another way. So, I look at it and I think, it's like I said last time we discussed this, we're keeping the largest portion of that zone the same way that it is already. It's adjacent to an area that's already zoned commercial, that corner piece is, and the residential area, I mean, you know, I'd rather have neighbors than I would have park space near my house, because the neighbors aren't gonna be out playing at all hours of the night in the yard, probably like they would in the park.
And a good civic center could still incorporate a nice garden, that sort of a thing. There's still some options that should still be utilized without it being a major park per se.
So if we sold the 4 lots, we would still have 6.7 acres.
And again, another concept is that you take the west end of the 4.71 and sell off 3 more lots there. And you still have 4+ acres adjoining. You just reconfigure.
You just okay. Because we need that.
And that would come close to retiring your bond. Or to put into a civic center and continue to pay this. Isn't that fun? The new planning commission member, he was sitting where you are, and we went through all of this kind of thing. And he said, "This is my first night. I think I'm going to quit."
The feel over your head.
Yeah, it was fun. And I think we've got a good planning commission, by the way. Things are moving well, and I've interviewed and asked for our alternate, but I need to put on the agenda, so we'll bring that to you. Real quickly, I don't know anything definitive, but I met with someone about a cemetery today. It's looking good. So I'll just put it to you that way. Now, exactly what that's going to be, where it's going to be, how it will be funded, private, joint, all of this is being discussed right now with the property owner and the developer. And as soon as I can get enough detail that I'm not going to divulge.
You don't want to show your hand, but I would prefer that it be private funded so that it's not our Ponzi scheme, it's theirs.
Yeah.
A Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
My father-in-law runs a Hyde Park cemetery, and he told me that it loses money in Hyde Park.
Like I said, it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
But it would be nice
Yeah.
for our community, I think.
Some of the ideas that we've looked at, I think the probability is more than a possibility now. After my meeting today. So, okay. We're going to table this, and I want you to consider what you want to do, rethink it. Maybe it's time that we get some more input from more residents as opposed to just those who want to view the concept.
Well, let's find out what the rest of the dog wants and not just the tail.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm concerned about. I want to make sure that this is city's property. It's the whole city's property. And so I'm not sure quite where we go from here. Think about it. I'll ask you to come up with some more information and decisions as to where we go next time, okay? Next. Name Elkridge Mills Parks, phases 1 and 2. We have Schuler Park. We all recognize that. We think that's a pretty cool idea. We keep going phase 1 and phase 2. Somehow that just doesn't ring. You know? It just doesn't have quite the ring to it we like. I'm going to propose that we rename phase 2 Park. And I have a name for it. That's the one.
That's the big
one.
That's when.
Are you ready?
Yes.
So I'm going to propose that we name it Bigler Park. And I'm not joking.
No.
I don't think anybody has spent any more effort or time and has any more desire to make it right. That doesn't mean it's his to design or to do with.
That means you're in charge of cleaning it up.
Yeah.
It's got your name on it.
No more reads.
And I don't know that we need to ask the residents. Maybe we should.
Well, it's city property, right?
It is city property, and it is. I just think that we need a name. Now, phase 1 Park, that's something else right now. We could simply name it Elkridge Meadows Park.
Recently passed
Ray Allred.
That's true. Ray Allred, yeah. He, does he live in Elkridge?
Yeah.
Or does he live in the county?
Well, he's in the county.
Or
He's
county,
county.
sorry, not city.
You know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Not that I just
No, my-
spoke
my-
with his daughter today, so.
My personal feeling, we have another family who did and donated an awful lot of property and other things to the city besides the Schulers. And, I mean, you're gonna go down that path, Clowards. We've got a Cloward well for crying out loud. I mean, if that gives you an idea of the role that they played in this community and the ground that they donated to the city and things of that nature. What I think too, maybe, when I saw this on the agenda, I wasn't sure exactly where we were going with this. In my mind, I'm thinking, so maybe we'll have a contest. Let's involve the community. Let's let them submit some names and let's have some.
And I'm okay with that.
Do something that way too. Maybe with one of the two parks. Just so we can get.
Let's get Little Park for big results.
Well, I think he
He
does.
gets
I think he has that in his house.
That's true.
He's got it's his version of the Garden of Eden.
It's probably a better idea to go that way.
Yeah, I think so.
Of the community,
The community input and just see what names they come up with.
or just one of them,
Or both of them.
Maybe on both of them. yeah.
What is your feeling about, is my reference to Dale premature? He didn't know about it until tonight, neither did you.
Well, I know it didn't.
Do you wanna think about it, or do you wanna just throw them all out to the community? Both of them?
I think we should throw it out to the community, but I think we should also consider Dale. I mean, him and his wife have been icons in the city for a long time and have done a lot of good.
He walked in front of
But,
Gary
I
Jensen
mean-
and said this way and that way with Grader. I mean, first roads were, Dell told him where they were going, so. He said, "Well, you're right."
I do I like throwing it out and just seeing what
And you would, and I
attractive
understand that.
names. I did propose the Schuler Park, just because they had donated all of the park to us, and Jim Worthington, but, and I thought it was good at the time, but, that, I haven't done that.
So we should put it up.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
We've got Ingram
But I
Field
appreciate that.
and Schuler
that
Park.
thought.
Well, that doesn't mean that we still can't do this. though.
Yeah,
That's true.
Just
I
until
will,
we do
I
this.
will then have it placed in the newsletter, this coming newsletter. Throw that out. Next, general plan ideas. Beyond what we talked about, we didn't have any specific direction as to where to go with this.
Well,
What do you think?
I honestly think, we kind of briefly discussed the idea of doing a survey and getting a feel from the residents. I think that there is strength in numbers. The more information we can collect, the better data we have, the better feel for what people want and expect from the city. I think it'll give us more direction, more clarity.
Can we take the previous survey, look at it closely, modify it, make sure that it is asking questions in such a way
We're
that
not
it's
steering
not
the answer. The bias.
we're not
Bias.
directing an answer.
Oh, absolutely. I think.
Would that be a way to start? And include in that the use of the city property.
Yeah, and parking names. I mean, it's just,
Just put it all in there.
well, but then if people return it, you know what I mean?
Well,
That's true.
before they had youth groups go out based on different sections of town, and they went out and
Collected them.
they went out and hand delivered them and actually waited at the doorsteps and while they filled them out, and then they took them back. We had, what Mag told us was the normal return on those is like 5 or 6%, and we were close to 40%.
I bet if it was online, if you could do it online in less than 5 minutes, don't you think a lot of people would?
A bunch of old people.
Well,
That's
the
true.
younger,
My generation.
your
got-
generation would, Paul's would not.
But I believe we can certainly use multiple.
Oh, sure.
Multiple venues.
Yeah, I would hope that we would incorporate online.
Because
It'd
if
be
you-
a whole different demographic that's gonna do an online survey than you will.
Yeah, but
You gotta
if
include them.
Okay.
if you say we have online open until this date, and then after that you go out and hand deliver to people who haven't already filled an online survey?
Just make it available to those that don't want to do it online, so they have the ability to participate.
Send it out
Yeah,
in the newsletter.
it needs to be.
I'm looking, what I'm wanting to find out right now is there someone who is willing to orchestrate how we're going to get this out? Instead of by committee, let's get one person to focus on the options of how to do that and hopefully become efficient, and you share your input with that person. Is there someone who would volunteer from the council to take that on as an assignment?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
No, I'm not
Thank
good
you.
at that.
And
We'll look
what
into
kind of,
it.
what kind of timeframe do you want for you to be able to have a comfortable timeframe to prepare? To put it out and then collect the information, that's gonna be another issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 council meetings, I should have these. Is that too long?
So let's do
So
tomorrow.
we need a
Nine
regular
or
survey
10.
too?
Might not be.
9 or 10?
No, he can get a copy of the survey
Yeah,
from Sean Elliott. He should have a copy of it.
okay.
I'll bet you he's got a soft copy still on his computer, and then you take a look at it and just go in. Because there were certain questions that were put in there to try and steer a particular agenda that we can take it out.
Sean Elliott?
Yeah,
Yeah, he'll get-
and he would, I can tell you, because I've talked to him quite a bit lately,
That'll
he's more
be
than
March-
happy to
March
share.
8th,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
since we
just
do
have really
have,
manipulative questions.
yeah, the 29th of February, the leap
Should
year.
we sell the city land or build a nice community center so they don't look like a junkie place? Just things like that.
Yeah, something simple that doesn't.
There's no manipulation at all.
Okay, thank you. Planning Commission stipend, Dale, could you bring that up? You're the one who wanted it there.
Yeah, I think that, you know, what I had proposed before, is I think that the planning commission actually fills a very important, function in the city, and they, in research and making sure our plans are accurate. And what I think there's 2 proposals that we can do. I was saying I would be willing to donate $50 of my monthly payment to city council or to the planning commission, or we discussed putting it into the budget, $25 per meeting, per attendant. And this actually would encourage the full participation of the planning commission. But that's a couple of ideas.
That's 8 people. So you know.
8, and so,
We pay our volunteer fire department EMS twice a year, is it going to? And so it collects, and they finally get a check that is, I don't know how much they get by comparison. But
How
it
much-
does,
how much
it
you get
depends on
twice a
the
year?
call.
Couple
How much?
Depends on the call.
Yeah, it's.
It depends on their
It
participation.
depends on the number
Training,
of calls and training, but typically you're between about $180 and $300.
Twice a year?
Twice a year, and the 300 is typically the EMTs that get to go out on a lot more calls than the fire department. I mean, that's kind of where it's at.
We just have to work it into some aspect of the budget. It would have to come out of general funds.
Well,
There's no place else for it to come. And we'd have to put that into, not the current budget, but the 2016, 17 budget that's coming up.
So what do we currently do for our planning commissioner members? I mean, when they,
We tell them thanks.
we just say thanks, I mean, do we get a little plaque, do we get anything for them when they're finished on the
2 years ago,
commission?
I invited them all to go to dinner, and I think 3 of them showed up. That was it.
I didn't even get to keep the plaque. I don't even know what happened, no.
It's
I
in
didn't
the
even
drawer.
get, is it?
She'll give it to you so you can hang it on the wall.
So now we know.
if you don't,
Okay, Dale, quickly, we gotta keep moving.
Right.
What do you think? Yes or no?
Yeah, they should be paid, and I'm fine with either way.
I need to know where the money's coming from.
I
Dale,
think
you
it
know
would,
what Dale is
Yeah.
in favor of it, so that
I'm mixed. I mean, I think if you pay people, they're gonna have more incentive to show up and more incentive to take the commitment seriously. I think we have a lot of great people on the planning commission, and I'm very happy for their work. Be nice to pay them. The question is, yeah, can we fit it in? I think if we can fit it in,
Realistically, we can fit in a broken axle on a snowplow. It happens, and so we fit it in. It's
Well, see,
$6,000,
actually, what would
$7,000.
that be a year? Eight,
it would be
that's
$200 a meeting, $400
a
a month,
meeting, 400 a month. So
4800 a year.
Well,
I mean,
If all of them showed up to every meeting, every month,
Or
and
if we
no,
had a plan
and I was gonna
commission
say, and no
meeting,
meetings were canceled.
Yeah, yeah.
so it's $480 per person, times 8, that's $3,500 roughly. Can we afford $3,500?
How much
Well,
did you spend?
it's 4,800, cause there's 8 people, right?
We haven't been.
We didn't.
Yeah, it's 4,800, $400 a month, cause there's 8 people on planning commission, they meet twice a month.
We've got a,
At $25, I mean, if you were
Yeah, I'd like
changing
to
the
know
stipend to 20,
of the
50,
planning
what do
commission.
you think?
I've expressed this before, we were brought on board as volunteers. And my thought is, let's just keep it volunteers. The cities, that money can be used in other areas. That money, whether we get it or not, isn't gonna make that much difference to us whether we're gonna go broke or not. It might give us a dinner or two.
And, in the next planning commission, I'm gonna visit with all of the members and ask them to rewrite or review their own bylaws so that we can say if 75% attendance or you're not, or we'll excuse you unless you give, and they need to come up with what is a valid excuse that would exempt them from that 75% attendance.
Yeah.
And I'm going to expect it. And I will just hold them to that from here on out. So they're going to be there, or they're not going to be there.
So,
Jim, how you feel the same way, Paul?
Yeah, I feel like Jim does.
Okay.
well, I just wonder if, as a token of our appreciation, if maybe just more, a gift card for dinner for you and your wife, or something like that. Because I think from my perspective, I do feel appreciative, and I think the city citizens, I hope, does the same thing, right? And just appreciate, just to let you know that we appreciate the work you've done. Give you something like that, where you can take your wife out.
What if you allow the mayor
or their
the
husbands out or whatever.
opportunity to offer a bonus of that nature
Yeah,
at some point
yeah,
during
something that,
as opposed to defining something specific because they may not like chilies.
yeah, that's fine.
Then
Just
you
give
know
them
that.
a vanilla gift card.
Just give them.
No, just something for us to show our
Something.
appreciation.
We do appreciate
That's why I was
what
asking,
you're
do we
doing.
do plaques, do we take them to dinner at Christmas? What do we do to show them our appreciation as a city for the work that they do on behalf of the city? That was kind of the intent of my question, and Ty phrased it much better.
My thinking was
$50, I mean, probably more difficult just to fill out the tax papers and do all that, right?
My reward is just the opportunity to be involved and have some input in the community. That's all I'm looking for.
I appreciate that. Okay. When we look at the budget, Royce and I will present the budget to you, and I will make a recommendation of some discretionary funds that there's a lot of what we need to use. And then we'll just see what Jim does what he tells us he's going to do. Okay, we're going to close our work session.